I usually introduce the speakers, so I will introduce myself. But first of all, I wanted to say that I am between you and the food, basically. So this is me. As long as I'm speaking, you're not eating. But it shouldn't stop you from asking questions after the talk, right? All right, so the talk is going to be called The Improvements on Privacy on iOS. First, I'm going to tell you who I am. Few of you know me by the name of Stuff, all my colleagues also, but it was also because there was other Manuel in the company. So this is my first name, this is my last name. It's important because it confuses a hell of a lot of people, especially in Germany, because no, there is no dash between the two parts of my last name. Because when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, that's a very complicated question. My blood is 100% Spanish. My parents were born in Spain. I was born and raised in Belgium. I live in Germany for the last 15 years, and basically, I describe myself as a no border. So I'm a European, no border, whatever. I'm an Apple technologist, which is kind of the weird title that I carry around from company to company. I work at ThirdGate. Since last year, I spent 3 years and 3 months in this pretty awesome company, 7 Principles. So this is why I refer to all those people as colleagues still. I founded SwiftConf, as you might know, and I also founded another thing called Pomcast, which used to be a podcast about Apple in many different languages. If you go look at pomcast.com/woz, W-O-Z, you will see an interesting interview from Steve Wozniak in 2007, which is interesting to have in Aftermath. Also, to finish on myself with a few slides, I am on the private side. I'm a dad of 4 with the same woman. I want to point. Yeah, I know. There are 12, 10, 6, and 2. And I'm an activist. So what does it mean that I'm an activist? All right, a few ethical slides about me. I am a refugee activist, so it means learn new cultures, new languages. It opens your mind and a lot of stuff. And this basically means thank you, my friend. I am an environmental activist. So right now, people, when they saw me arriving here, my colleagues from 7P, the first thing was they asked me is, did you get down from your tree? I was not in a tree, sadly, but I am a supporter of the Hambar Forest. For those of you who know this, about 30 kilometers from here, there is the biggest coal pit, or one of the biggest coal pits in Germany. Every time I look at a map of Europe, the size of Europe, I know where I live. There's this white thing in the middle, which is an horrible pit of coal. And coal kills, just like nuclear power and diesel do. So if you can't afford, just install a few solar panels on your roof, buy an EV, and do everything you can. And also optimize your code. We'll speak about that later. Also, I'm vegan. Like there's at least another one of us in the room. So please stop eating animals, seriously. And yes, beings die for milk and eggs as well. And leather. All right, let's move on to the technical stuff. There's the reason why I put all those slides before is because about you would have known me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I was eating a lot of hamburgers and whatnot and didn't care about a lot of stuff, ethical stuff. Then I started making politics. It's another thing. I spent 4 years in the city council, city of Kerpen. So this is why everything that I'm trying to do right now is a mix between my coding skills and my ethical skills. So whose privacy? My privacy. By the way, this should be an inspiration for Apple for the next logo of iOS. It's free. Tim, take it. So the privacy is mine. This is something I'm taking from the environmental activists. We are used to say something like whose forest? My forest. So the privacy is mine. And this is why it's very important that everybody is like thinking about this as term as their data, basically their life. And that's why I subtitled this talk, a look at the karma-oriented API. No, karma isn't a framework. It's not the last framework on the block. It's really the karma thing. I'm not very religious, actually I'm atheist, but I do believe there is this notion of good karma. All right, there is no way we can speak about karma or Apple without hearing Steve and what he said in 2010, which were the beginnings of iOS in terms of the large public. So I hope the sound is going to be loud enough. It's not.
Very different view of privacy.
Oh, it's me. It's because of me. I will restart this. It's because of me. I am the problem.
Privacy extremely
It's not very loud. Can you put a little bit more? I will restart. All right, so let's try again.
We've always had a very different view of privacy than some of our colleagues in the Valley. We take privacy extremely seriously. As an example, we worry a lot about location in phones. And we worry that some 14-year-old is going to get stalked and something terrible is going to happen because of our phone. And so, as an example, before any app can get location data, we don't make it a rule that they have to put up a panel and ask, because they might not follow that rule. They call our location services and we put up the panel saying, this app wants to use your location data. Is that okay with you? Every time they want to use it. And we do a lot of things like that to ensure that people understand what these apps are doing. That's one of the reasons we have the curated app store. We have rejected a lot of apps that want to take a lot of your personal data and suck it up into the cloud. A lot.
So remember about this a lot and suck it up into the cloud. And now think about a few companies. So what we'll cover is basically nothing else than, it's actually a very easy way of, this topic is not so hard to like organize and write a talk about it, write a book about it or whatever, because if you go into settings in privacy, this is the list you will find. Was looking at the same list in the settings of Android, but I don't know. Anyway, I didn't really found it. I'm not even kidding. Actually, at one point in the future, I will most probably hurt myself and look at the other side of the mirror and see what they do or what they do not do in terms of privacy. So it's basically all those stuff. Like, so we will speak about the photos framework, the contacts, which is like my beloved old friend, the contact framework, which luckily is not in C anymore. Location, which Steve was mentioning, which is a big deal. The calendar, the very old, crusty calendar API, which hasn't changed for the last 25 years. And probably very briefly, if I have time, actually we will speak directly about Siri and search, but then if I have time, about notifications and Mapkit. So why? Why is privacy important? I'm not totally done with the ethical thing before the code comes on the slide. It is because behind every user there's actually a person, right? So it's not just a random number out there, it's an actual person which has like a story behind. And so if you put yourself in the perspective of this user, that might help you do the right stuff as a developer. Also, Apple actually builds trust with the privacy logo, right? So that this is something they started in iOS 11, I think. They added it on macOS and all those stuff. So there is always this, it's also a little bit of a marketing side of it, but because it's a good thing. So again, it's not only good for the karma, it is actually good for the commerce. It turns out there is a way out there to make money with good stuff. You don't always have to be bad to make money. And then the next thing is like, it's kind of on the wrong slide, but the thing that I like about iOS, or the thing that I like about Apple, is that they are pretty bad at server side. So in terms of privacy, this is actually pretty awesome, because if you look at what iOS does, it's actually, most of it is device processing. And if you look at the APIs that they offer on the server side, it's nah. All right, so that's another company which is good at this. So it's a good thing, right? And also, device processing in 2018, it's a no-brainer in terms of the power, the amount of power that you can do. You can do all this stuff like whatever, face recognition or whatever, or Touch ID or stuff like that on the device. So again, treat yourself like your users like you want it to be treated, and it might be useful. So I built a little sample app, which I will show now and then. It's called My Privacy App. First called it Privacy App, but then I realized when I went into the settings, privacy was the same as into the settings, privacy. So if you call an app the same name as another of those panels, it's very confusing. So this app is just doing something very simple. It shows a few sample codes, and I'm trying to go over every single of the API. Super simple demo, and there is also a link to the privacy settings. It tests contacts, calendar, location, photos, and stuff like that. And Siri. Wait, Siri. I wasn't planning to do anything with Siri, but Apple decided otherwise. I ended up finding myself in this very interesting situation where actually Siri and search is by default for every app. I'm happy to speak to anyone which has more knowledge about Siri than me during this conference, because I am a little bit confused. The app appears in the settings Siri, but in Siri and search doesn't appear in your app. So it's until your app does anything related to privacy, so it shows the contacts or the photo or whatever, and then all of a sudden, oh, look, there is Siri. So this is, I don't know if it's not completely baked from Apple or if I am not completely baked, I don't know. But the thing that really drove me crazy is when I was reading this, oh yeah, this is the time when you use this thing. So Siri may learn from and make suggestions based on how you use this app. Interesting. So I don't know. When I read those kind of stuff, I'm very confused, and I don't exactly know what they are going to do with my data, right? Even if it's Apple. For me, it's a very confusing sample code. There are a couple of different sessions on WWDC, but I really I would have to go over it again because it was confusing. I don't want to spend too much time on Siri and search, but Siri and voice recognition and treatment of data and whatever is very important. It's going to be very important for the future. If you think about the AirPods, I don't know if you have seen that, but outside, in the world outside, everybody's wearing AirPods now, which is interesting. And also there is the HomePod also. And all the world of Alexa and whatever they are called, those stuff are starting to be bigger. All right, so let's start with the code and import one of the frameworks. We'd import photos, the photos framework. The permission thing, you might notice, most of you, I'm guessing, so it's kind of a reminder, is for most of this stuff always the same. You will always have, the first time you ask, you either have an answer being it's authorized. If you said yes, it's denied. If you said no, it's not determined if you haven't said anything yet. So the not determined is the one you can actually ask the user to, the first time you ask him. The last one is a little bit more tricky, restricted. Restricted is there in only most of the time two cases. Parental controls is one, and MDM is another one, right? So in the term of restricted, you shouldn't, Apple doesn't recommend actually that you, or actually Apple recommends that you don't ask the user to go in the settings and change this, because the user won't be able to go in the setting and change this. So this is mostly the case that I said that my daughter isn't allowed to share her contacts, for example, or the MDM of a company decided that you cannot give your location or something like that. So it's actually used less to ask the user, because most of the time it's very frustrating to ask a user to do something he cannot do, or she cannot do, or it cannot do. Yeah, complicated. So the first time when I build those kind of apps, I tend to like to make the app crash as often as possible. Why? Because I'm learning from this. So I build very simple code, very on purpose dumb code. I don't have a hard time writing dumb code somehow. I'm good at it. So I crashed the first time because I obviously forgot the info playlist. This info playlist, we'll come back on it. It's a very important part of the whole just about privacy, about telling your user why are you going to use those data. So that's a sample from an app that is not from me, but I will reference it later in the talk. It asks the first time to access your photos, and it tells you why, and this information comes from your info playlist. So those amazing keys, NS photo library use as description, and what you put here is actually what you put here is actually very important because you're supposed to do exactly what you say you're going to do. In terms of photos, they added something lately, which is the ability to only add to your photos. Until recently, you only had like full control, read and write. Now you can write. This is confusing because maybe it's me, but the only way that I found to trigger this guy there is actually by using this one here, the UI image write to saved photo albums. And those nil, 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 don't be afraid. It's because it's a selector. It's an object, it's a selector, so it's basically the callback in the old C way. That's what it is. The one on the bottom, though, the request authorization, whatever I write for a code, will first generate the previous one, the one who asks full control. So the confusing part of it is that you end up in a situation where you actually have two strings, the one that I showed you previously, and the same one with add in the middle, and as photo library add uses description, and they're not cumulative like in location. It's not first you ask for one or the other. It's once you've asked already for full control, then the other one isn't going to appear. So I don't know. I would have preferred personally that they just give us like switches, like read write, a little bit more like HealthKit does it. We will have a look at the way HealthKit do it at the very end of the presentation. All right. Speaking about asking, let's listen to Steve a few seconds again.
Privacy means people know what they're signing up for in plain English and repeatedly. That's what it means. I'm an optimist. I believe people are smart. And some people want to share more data than other people do. Ask them. Ask them every time. Make them tell you to stop asking them if they get tired of your asking them. Let them know precisely what you're going to do with their data. Okay. That's what we think.
So I don't know for you, but when I hear ask M every time, somehow I think about Windows Vista. Like, are you sure you want to start this app? Like, oh, yes, I'm sure. Are you sure you want to? Oh, yes, I'm sure. So the hard thing about ask M every time is there is, there's this convenience over privacy, convenience over security. We know this convenience over, right? There is UX and UI. You don't want to put too many hurdles into basically the feet of your users for the sake of privacy, but at the same time, who am I here? I'm the privacy evangelist, so it's a hard one. So, but what he means is that, and we'll see that later, one of the things that Apple does is, in terms of location, for example, if you allow the location to be accessed for your app, also when it's in the background, 24 hours later, it will tell you again. It will let you know, by the way, yesterday you said this app is allowed to access your location in the background. It is doing it right now. Are you really sure you want to do it again? This is the only example I know in the whole stuff, in the whole privacy level from Apple, where Apple think it's necessary to do it. But yeah, that's the whole gist about Ask Them Everything. So the problem with Ask Them Every Time is you cannot ask them every time. Once you've asked, if the people said no, it's too late, actually. You cannot ask again, and the pop-up will come again, which luckily, because otherwise it would be really frustrating for a user, like, do you want? No. Do you want? No. Do you want? No. And hoping the guy will say yes at one point. The only thing you can say is you can tell them, all right, I'm sorry, this and this functionality of my app cannot work. Please go in the settings. And this please go in the setting has this very useful UI application open settings URL string, which is actually useful because you jump right in your app's privacy settings. And so about the photos again, you have this never, add photos only, read and write. It's kind of, for me, it's a little bit confusing. But yeah, it's a list of different permissions. All right, something very useful if you work with this kind of thing and you have to develop, you've said once, all right, you tested your code once and you want to test it again. You can reset the location and privacy if you go in settings, general reset. And the permission the problem is that the permission are cached, actually. Like the keychain, when you delete an app, the keychain doesn't get deleted. All the keys from your apps are still there. The next time you're going to reinstall the app, all the keys, the password are going to be there. which most of the time is useful, but to develop is not useful. If you do this though, remember, it's going to do it for every single app. So it's better to do it on the simulator. If you do it on your production device, be ready to answer the question again for every single app, which is not a huge deal, but it could be potentially a little bit irritating. All right, there's this thing today that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I like to speak about metadata. I'm going to turn around this whole topic of metadata and from which perspective you can grab data as like the very mean developer. So one thing that I could do, for example, is that I could say that an image, which I'm grabbing from a PH asset, and by the way, I am not here going into every single detail of every single framework. Like the photo framework has a bunch of stuff. If you want to learn about this, just look other talks or check out the documentation. I'm really focused on the privacy side of the stuff. So if I get a PH asset, I can then make it an MK annotation so that I can show on Mapkit the coordinate and the title. And the result of this is what I was showing before, that I can show you that you have been at this place at this time because I know that the photos are geolocated. The first time you start the camera on your iPhone, it will ask you, do you want the photos to be geolocated? And obviously you can say no, but it's not very convenient, right? I really like the fact that I don't have to make a folder called Iceland, another folder called Cologne, and so on and so forth. Or for the sake of face recognition, for example, a folder called, whatever, a mother or whatever. So it's always a very hard choice. There's this thing called the UI image picker controller, which where the user decides which picture he's going to give. By the way, this is UIKit. It's not even in the Photos framework, and this is just way too less used. Generally, pickers are just way too less used everywhere, and we'll speak about that later again. So you just initialize this guy. It's out of process. We'll speak about what it is again later. Then you can say it's either from my photo library or from the camera, and then you're going to present it. It's just like a regular view controller, and then you have this very useful callback with the info. Now the info is a dictionary. So what's in this dictionary? There are a couple of keys. One is the URL, which is a very long /volume/ or actually /var/ blah blah blah. And at the end of this very long path, you have a UDID with a JPEG. The second one is a call to the Photos app itself, asset library, like with this scheme. And so it's going to jump directly in your photo library at the right point. And the third one is actually the most useful, I think, for developers, is that it actually will give us a full UI image with not only the image itself, obviously, but like the size and other stuff like that. All right, let's move on and import the contacts framework. So it's going to use the NS Contacts user description, and if you forget this key, you're going to have an amazing TCC crashing due to privacy violation. I don't know who comes up with those names, but they are. Everyone is more awesome than the previous one. And, and so the same stuff, you will see it over and over again. You have to add this one. By the way, if you look in info plist and you start with letter P, privacy, you will see a bunch of those stuff. And some of those which I won't even touch today, obviously, like Bluetooth peripheral or Face ID or stuff like that. So what is, or actually, how do you see that it's an out-of-process alert? How can I tell? Well, it's actually pretty simple. If you start the app, you wait for the alert, and then you kill your app in Xcode, you quit your app. Well, guess what? You download the app. Now I think it's off, actually. Yeah. All right. No. So you will still see this thing here, and you can still upload the app and it will work. So that's a very good hint that it wasn't in your app. It's also a very good hint for privacy because it means that your app actually doesn't have access to the stuff. Sadly, not everything is out of process today, still 2018. But you should always check the authorization status. We might have a problem on the whatever, so I might change microphone for the third time. It's funny that happened to me. This is my last microphone. So but this should be good on the battery side. Yeah. Anyone remember phones used to have a cord as well? I know. That's how you can tell how old I am. Yeah, I love the icon they used to use for to represent the phone app on the iPhone, which is like this thing. And if you show it to kids, they were like, "What is this?" Yeah, first time I show a vinyl to my kid, they were like, "Oh, it's a big black CD." That's what it is. Anyways, so you should always ask for authorization status because, well, the user might say no this afterwards, right? So you do not like think that because the user said once yes, it will not change his mind later. So you always have to check for the authorization status. And obviously, you've seen that already. I put it on the slide again for the sake of showing you that photos and contacts and calendars we see later works the exact same way. They have the same not determined, restricted, denied, authorized, same stuff. The way I do it is I have I check the authorization status. If it's authorized, I'm good. I do my stuff. If it's not determined, I check. I ask for a request, and then it should be one of the three others. And if it's not those, it won't have access until some user action or admin action happens. So now this is that's very informational slide. It shows you some of the things that you can get from the Contacts API. So you can get the name, obviously the nickname, the department, the job, and stuff like that. But you can also get the birthday, the image data, so the face of the person, and the one that I love the most is is when I press the wrong button. That's the one that I love the most. The one that I love the most is the relation key, the CN contact relation key. So if you get that, you know who's my wife, for example. All right, so I tend to divide, in terms of privacy, a lot of time, developers in three categories, which might remind you an old movie. The first one being the good developer. The good developer would just have a predicate which just returns one name or two names, whatever, and only a few keys. The contact given name key and the family key, and then that's it. Now the bad developer would take basically all the properties from this guy. So it's the same John Appleseed, but you can see the kind of stuff that we have actually. It's like the phone number here, but the whole phone number, but also there's the email address, which is very useful to send spam, but also the street, which you can reverse, which you can geocode actually, and stuff like that, right? And now there's the good, the bad, and obviously there's the ugly developer. The ugly developer takes all your freaking contacts, every single one of them, and you know what he does? Well, go ahead, he uploads them on the server, right? And I'm sure no company in the world ever do that. No company, right? No company do that ever in the world. So, why do I need to give the whole freaking access to my contact address book to write to a single person to WhatsApp? Which is the reason why I don't use WhatsApp, among other stuff. Actually, if you are an app which requires my contacts address book, you failed with me. I'm sorry, but I have so many persons over there. There is not even a way, from a developer perspective, to ask access to a group, which would be awesome, right? Like access to my colleagues, perfectly fine. Spam them. Ex-colleagues are in the same folder. But the family, nah, not so much, right? The reason I say that is because actually you don't need to ask permission, right? Enter the wonders of ContactsUI. By the way, the contact framework used to be in C, for those olders among us, was really like the best way to run over to your mother and cry. And now it's written in Swift, or actually in Objective-C, obviously. But the ContactsUI was always in Objective-C, which was already nice. And the other nice stuff was that the ContactsUI is actually, it's out of process, and it allows you to pick a single contact or more than one contact, right? So it's just a controller which you present, and then you pick a contact. You also have the multiple way, like you have a callback called, so don't be confused, this one is called did select contact, and the next one is called why do I show with my finger? I have the magical wand. Contacts with a S. And it's very important that the single will be ignored as soon as you implement the multiple, right? And the only thing that I don't really like in this guy here, I think the UI is weird because there is a cancel and done button on the top right. But to be honest, really, I don't know how I would have to make it better. Also, this thing is buggy because if you now search for a contact, well, you will have the search result, but you won't be able to select them. But anyway. Not a big deal for Apple, apparently. Anyway, next topic is the contact with the location. Because the thing is, since iOS 11, we have a very, very convenient, or sometimes very weird, API which allows us to take a postal address, which comes from the contacts, and a CN postal address, and get out of it a CN place mark, which is very useful to put on a map. So it's very quick. You don't have to rely on geocoding or stuff like that. Yeah, that thing on the bottom is actually because it confused the hell out of me, because in the DubDub 2017, they said something like on tvOS the contacts framework isn't available, and so you can't continue to use those address dictionary, because there used to be address dictionary. I'm getting a call, which I don't need. They used to have those dictionaries, but sometimes, yeah, Apple, I don't know what they mean. Anyway, CL placemark is very convenient actually, because you can just, if you do this very simple extension, which I did, you can just get the coordinate of it and you can put it on a map actually. Also, obviously, do not do this in production code. This is sample code. This sample code, by the way, does a lot of very not so amazing stuff because it's sample code, right? So I, for the sake of spending less time. Location and Mapkit, of course. Next topic. Well, it didn't ask me yet if I wanted to give my location, but it sure knows that I'm in Germany already. So why? No, it's not in my regional settings. I am an American in my simulator. Sometimes I like to be an American, but but only in the simulator. No, actually, I guess it's the IP address. That's my only guess, to be honest. It really, like, it doesn't put a blue dot, you know, but it shows you this part of the map, which is convenient, sure. So what I don't get, and obviously I should file a radar, which I haven't done yet, but I think the IP address querying thingy should be part of requesting your location, because that's what it is, even though it's not very precise because it's only based on your IP. So yeah, what can I say? Change your IP. So you request the authorization. It used to be just called request authorization, and then they added the when in use and always. So you have two ways of requesting authorization. It's either only when the app is in use or always. Back in the days, it wasn't a big deal because the app wasn't in the background anyway, because there was no multitasking. So, and then they added multitasking, and then for many years, the always was the default, which was kind of frightening. And so then they added only when in use. Little aside, the colored status bar, you know, the double status bar thing, just to remember you, previously well, actually previously, but now as well, it used to be the whole bar. Blue is for location, red is for microphone, and double green was for call, double green. I don't know how many people spent nights at this double call bar. And now on iPhone 10, I think they finally found a better way, which is the same colors, but it's around the time. That allows me to mention that the activity indicator actually left the building on the iPhone 10. So which is kind of weird, because all your activity indicator that you are not shown on the iPhone 10. There is though it used to be in the previous betas and the first betas. While the 10 was a new stuff in the betas of iOS 11, I think, and Altwin Gens has done a little bit of swizzling to bring it back to you the Knight Rider's way, which is very interesting. All right, so the app hasn't crashed this time, even though I forgot my info playlist. So this is another thing where I'm like consistency-wise, I am scratching my head. I'm thinking like, so either you crash all the time, please, Apple, or don't do this to me. Like sometimes it just shows you message in the console. Also, start to be confused with me with all those keys, NS location always and when in use, there's description and all those keys. We will speak about it a little bit. With great power comes great responsibility. Obviously, as a dev, you should ask yourself, do you really need to have access to the location info when you're not using the app? As a user, you should ask you, do you really want to know this specific app from this company in Palo Alto to have access to my location all the time? And then battery. I was telling you that I'm a kind of an environmental guy. This is something for another talk, but as developers, we are obviously responsible for the actions we take in terms of using the battery and draining the battery and generating more powers. And it's actually a big scale if you make the sum. So yeah, but that's for another talk. All right, so this arrow is either a low or full, which is interesting. All the descriptions are there. So all low means that it's not actively getting your location. There is this concept of the significant location changes, which means that if I'm walking around in a city, it will have only a location changed by the time that I turn, for example, right? So it won't take your location all the time. I should mention, though, that there is a way to trigger a location query from another user, which is by using, for example, Find My Phone or Find My Friend, that starts to be a little bit creepy when you can actually basically, if I really want to drain the battery of my daughter all the time, I can. Anyway, and be aware of system services. We'll come back on this again later. System services, there's a lot of stuff that Apple does. All right, so the location alert evolution. It's interesting. So at first, nowadays, the user is asked, do you want to have access while using the app? In the past, it used to be the same question, except without while using the app. And in the past, also, there was no string. So we're happy in 2018. We really are happy campers, because I come from a time where the user didn't know why the app was using its location. And so if you say hello, so the string is actually the string used from when in use. You should present this first. I will tell you why. It's new since iOS 8, and again, it's the same as it was before iOS 8, but except that it's before it was always before iOS 8. That's yeah. The explanations are that's actually useful. The explanation that you write, you find it back again in the settings here, So yeah. So the other option, if you ask always, or if you ask always, then you will have this terrible UI alert which has 3 options. So it's at always and when in use. The string always is still there. It is only for old iOS, and by old iOS I mean iOS 10 and previously. Go out there and tell to an Android developer that iOS 10 is old. This is what I love in the iOS development world is stop developing for iOS 10, please, now, today. But so it's still there, but it's ugly, right? Because you have 3 options. I don't know for you, but I really don't like UI alerts which have like a bunch of options, and especially when it's on bottom of each other. So the user, it's kind of confusing. There is another way to do it, which is by first asking when in use, and after when, like, elevate the privileges, right? Like when a feature in your app requires always, then ask always. And by that time, the user cannot say no anymore, right? It doesn't have like no. It's only while using the app or always allow. You can obviously go into settings and turn it off. The other thing is that it turns out that I think a bunch of developers out there are just asking for the full Monty just in any case, right? Like give me always access, and it turns out they might not even need it. Yeah, so you first ask request in use, you have don't allow or allow, and then you ask request, and then you don't have don't allow anymore. So speaking of services, if you go in settings, privacy, location services, system services, Apple will hate me. Especially if you then go in significant locations. This is very interesting information. But again, the reason why I'm happy to be an iOS developer in terms of privacy is because I think Apple is doing a lot of things wrong. Right. Wow. But it's never enough, right? On privacy, it's never enough. So there's always a way to tell them, by the way, this and this could be better. All right, calendar is actually not satisfying. Let me put it politely. The calendar API hasn't changed forever. It's kind of still the same. It uses an NS predicate, which is something which is very useful, but the other problem is when it crashes with those weird errors. So in case you like weird errors, I always say calendar, but it works for calendar or events. Turns out it's because historically it's more like caldav-ish, so it's the same whether it's an event or a calendar actually. So I concentrate on event, and guess what? This is the same as PH or CN. Obviously this is dangerous because this is the same only because it's an int, but if at one point Apple changed this, you're screwed. This is something I do in my demo app, by the way. I have one controller for all three of them, and I use the int value. Do not do this at home. So to the next crash, yoo-hoo! Yeah. And behind, the application has crashed and you have to use the blah 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 yada yada yada. I know. All right, so the problem with the calendar is that it has actually access to all the freaking calendars. You remember the discussion about the groups? I would like to allow a group of people, I would like to allow an app to have access to a group of people in my calendar. I would like to allow an app to have an access to, for example, my local calendar. That would potentially be fine. But not to my birthday calendar, please. And the reason is very simple, is that if I give you access to my birthday calendar, then there are a couple of names over there, right? So you have names and you have dates. No, not too shabby. Also, I don't know why Apple would want to know that I like pink. Anyways, so the thing with the calendar API is like, what have you done? Ask the policewoman. And so I wanted to know everything you've done for all the time since Jesus was born. Until the time where iOS 3983 will be released. But you cannot do this because for performance reasons, you can only grab the 4 last years. Right? Obviously, you can do a loop which goes like 4 years, 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. Right. So what do? You get the events from a predicate. This predicate is actually starting 4 years ago to now, and 4 years ago, please, you use date components and you don't do 365 times 30 times 24 times whatever. So where have you been? Because I was just asking, like, what have you done? Where have you been? Well, it turns out the first time you start calendars, same thing, it will ask you to geolocate your contacts. I think it's very useful. But again, because of this, you might have this amazing EK structured location, which has a CL location property. So you end up with this amazing structured location here, which has a few stuff, like geolocation and so on and so forth. And so at the end of the day, I can tell you that I was working on my talk while sitting on the top of Machu Picchu, which would be interesting. So I can show you where you were. I can also open the URL. I can email all your friends because the, invitees or whatever. Yeah, so there are a bunch of stuff here like that I want to point out in an EK event. So there are, for example, the recurrence. So that allows me to know what kind of good or bad habits you have. E.g., why do you go to the gym every day? Or stuff like that. Anyway, and also the attendees, as I was mentioning right now, is a big thing actually. EventKit UI is sad. It's a little bit like ContactsUI, except it's not. It needs access to your contact, so you would be like, what? So there are no links to settings, and best of all, it's not out of process. I am not sure what Apple is doing there. Actually, I'm sure they're doing nothing. I think they probably fired the developers. Nobody knows how the code works. So anyways, notification, very briefly on notification. Background fetch, I don't know if you know this, but they don't ask for a user permission. So if you only ask background fetch, you can basically sneak into the user's whatever. By definition, they're disturbing your privacy, right? But it's your fault if you say yes, because it's popping in front of you. Tim was saying a couple of months ago that he discovered that he was using actually a lot of notification. Notification are supposed to be very important stuff, right? And I get pissed off at all those news apps that tells me that the score of soccer. I don't care. But anyway, yeah. Also be careful with the kind of sounds you use. And I'll let you imagine what this emoji is for. The user doesn't know what you will display also, which is interesting. So it's kind of a surprise. ElfKit, very briefly as well, because I think it's very important and very interesting in ElfKit. Also, ElfKit work with a few different concepts. There's an object type, there's the source, which identifies where the information is coming from, which is very useful. The health store is this store which shares between all the apps the same database. Then you can use a query, statistics. And the request authorization is really fine-grained here. That's what I like, is you get to choose what you want to have. And also, there is no feedback on a rejected read authorization for privacy purpose. If an app asks me to have access to my blood sugar, and then I say no, the app won't know that I said no. Which from a developer perspective might sound weird, but it's just because so that the app doesn't know that I'm for example diabetic or something like that. So it's a privacy concern. So yes, sometimes it sucks for the developer, but I don't care. I mean it's always Apple should be concentrated on the user, not on us. The clicker doesn't work anymore. After the microphone, now it is the clicker. But you know what? The touch bar works. So yeah, more than APIs. I'll let you check out the slides. I put a link after the talk. There is this whole thing in the app review settings, which say a couple of stuff, which are interesting. One of these is that it should request only data to relevant to the core functionality, and where possible, it should use the out-of-process pickers. Well, guess what? Most apps don't. So I don't know, Apple, if you hear me, it's time to reject WhatsApp. So a few references. This talk wouldn't be possible. So this is where the code for my demo app is. It's at GitLab. It used to be at GitHub, and then I was told Microsoft about it. Which, by the way, Microsoft is the one that I like the most out of all the others. Only because you're here. No. No, but for I will speak about this in the panel, I think, for obvious reasons. Oh yeah, by the way, that's something very quickly, something before I forget, something that drives me nuts in terms of privacy. iCloud, you can say a lot of good things about iCloud, but if you, well, oh come on! But the data are shared between Amazon, Azure, so AWS from Amazon, Azure from Microsoft, and Google Cloud. So it's like, I don't know, but again, you remember I told you Apple server side, nah, they're not very good. So this wouldn't be possible, this talk wouldn't be possible without Felix Krausen, which is an amazing developer, which has done tons of research on privacy. So thanks, Felix, check out his website. Videos from Apple, which I don't know for you, I'm not a reader, I'm a watcher. I watch a ton of video. There's a very amazing PDF on security from Apple. And also, every year there is something about privacy, but this year, it's actually, interestingly enough, I've been invited to speak to a few conferences. The next one's going to be in Torino, early November. And apparently I'm going to be a Swift hero over there, whatever that means. Yeah, I know. Privacy is something which is also now kind of trendy, which is a good thing. Oh yeah, and let's finish with this.
Well, I think the privacy thing has gotten totally out of control, and I think most people are not aware of who is tracking them, how much they're being tracked, and sort of the large amounts of detailed data that are out there about them, nor about the companies that possess the data.
So yeah, the last one. I'm sorry, but for me, this is a better picture than Tim. No pun intended, Tim. You look awesome. All right. So yeah, more about the companies that possess them. So it's a general thing about think about where your data are. Not only your data, but oh yeah, it's a wrong language. Oh fuck, it's wrong language again. Oh gosh. All right, let's finish with this language. That's gonna be interesting. All right, thank you very much. Any questions? I think if there is one question, we'll have one, and we'll see if the microphone works. Does the microphone works? Oh.
Stuff last 1 week ago when Jeff...
Microphone in front of your mouth.
Last week when Jeff Williams was introducing the new Apple Watch with watchOS 5.
Yeah.
He said that...
Speak in front of my... This way. This is perfect.
Yeah. He said that the heart frequency data gets put into HealthKit, and also the EKG data gets put into HealthKit. And then he said at the end of that, and now the data actually gets backed up, encrypted to iCloud. And so that's the first sign that actually HealthKit is actually putting stuff into the cloud. It wasn't doing that before, like 1 year ago. I think it was still on device. And I was just thinking what you think of that, because the other big question with privacy is that Apple's moving in the direction of biosensors. There's a really good article from Professor Lars Steinmetz, and to do with biosensors. And Silicon Valley is going pretty crazy with biosensors, and Apple's moving in that direction. And there's a huge trade-off with privacy. If every person is tracked with enough biosensors, you can change medicine. You can actually make predictions of the future to do with their health. So, for example, this year, Cardiogram used machine learning to work out the heart, with the data from heart frequency, to work out if someone who is 5 months in the future were going to become diabetic or not, and to actually say, look, you can actually stop this happening. So the trade-off is if you actually become transparent as a person, and all your data gets sent into the cloud for analysis through machine learning, you can actually save people's lives 10 years into the future. And this whole area is going to become really controversial with privacy, because no matter what you do with a person's data, how you change it around and make it opaque, at some point in time, you can never... The technology is going in a direction where you have to actually become transparent in order to predict someone getting cancer and stopping that happening.
Yeah. So no, I think I get your question.
The question is like, you're talking about privacy, but I think we're moving in a direction where society's actually going in a direction where it's not going to become valid to become totally private in order to save lives.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your question. It's kind of a hard one, because it reminds me the chief of Sun, which in the past, like 20 years ago, said, whether you want it or not, you have no privacy. Actually, I would like to have some privacy, but at the same time, I give you another example. There's a guy in my family which is actually younger than me, and I'm young already. And he has actually pretty bad health. He has very funky stuff now and then. Like the last time he had something with his blood or whatever, or the heart rate or whatever. And actually, I just wrote him an email yesterday telling him, dude, you should buy a watch Series 4. It might save your life. And I'm trying to convince my wife to actually wear my old watch, and she's like, no, I don't need this. Well, she actually didn't need the iPhone, and up until she had the iPhone. But this is a very good point. The watch and other stuff like that might save life at the cost of potentially the privacy out there. What does Apple mean when they say it's encrypted? This is why I reference, by the way, to the security paper. iCloud might be out there at some other companies that some of them you might not trust, but apparently Apple is really hard on like block encrypting or whatever, or chunk encrypting, like they do chunk of data and they encrypt those chunk. So the only thing you can do about this is ask again and again and again Apple to show me the code, show me the way you do it, show me the way you encrypt the data. If the data is fully encrypted and I can trust you to 100%, there's no way to trust anyone to 100%. Then yeah, for the sake of saving life potentially. So yeah, there is no real answer to your question. Because I would like that we are in a society in the future where we can actually protect privacy, but that requires actually a lot of good developers, which is actually, you know what, the data breaches are only there because some random developers somewhere thought it was a good idea to save the password in NS user defaults. Yeah, it's on us. And the other thing, to conclude on your question, and do not do everything that whoever in the company told you to do, right? I don't think anyone in this room will have a hard time finding the next job. So have your middle fingers ready and leave a random company that will tell you we will do this analytics or this analytics, right? So I was lucky to never be in this situation, and by the way, and I never left any company for that reason. Let me be clear, and surely without middle fingers. But today I'll conclude on the fact that I used to in my career I wrote twice apps for cigarette producers 20 years ago. I wouldn't do this today anymore. So for privacy, we are all responsible for protecting the privacy of our users. It's a community thing.